Hello, welcome back to Reading Swizzle. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Andromeda Cartwright. She is the Chief Academic Officer at Louisiana Key Academy. Louisiana Key Academy is a very special set of schools because they address the needs of students with dyslexia. And I think that this could probably be used as a template for all public schools in the United States. So I've invited Andromeda Cartwright to talk with us and share her wisdom and knowledge about the Louisiana Key Academy. Welcome, Andromeda.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation.
Thank you. Why don't you tell me how Louisiana Key started and why is that different from a lot of other schools?
Sure. Louisiana Key Academy started in 2013. And something that's really special about the school is that it was actually started by two parents who had kids with dyslexia. So our founder, Dr. Laura Cassidy, she has a daughter who has dyslexia. And we also have Suzanne Petty, who now works with our sister organization, the Dyslexia Resource Center, who also had a child with dyslexia. And although they were able to have the resources to get their kids the things that they needed, they recognized that thinking about how difficult it was for them, even with them having the resources and the funds to get the instruction that their children needed, they thought about, what about all these other families who don't have the resources? So it must be even more difficult for them. So they really wanted to be able to open a school that would be open to all students. So we're tuition free, to be able to make sure that all students who had dyslexia would be able to receive that evidence-based instruction.
Wow. So I applaud their efforts because I know that's the case and the reality for so many people who cannot afford. And in order to level the playing field, we need to give kids the tools that they need to unravel the code.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the curriculum, your student enrollment. What kind of program is different at Louisiana Key Academy?
Sure. So one of the biggest things that we're super proud of is just our admissions process. So through our admissions process, students are able to receive free dyslexia testing through that process.
Mm-hmm.
So when students come to us, they don't already have to have a diagnosis of dyslexia. We diagnose them with dyslexia through our admissions process. So that's been really great because, again, just thinking about, a lot of families don't even have access to be able to receive a diagnosis. So thinking about evaluations and things like that can run thousands of dollars. So just at the start, we're able to, through that admissions process, identify the student as having dyslexia, and then they automatically go into our program. So our program is a K through high school program. We have 3 different campuses, so the grade levels are a bit different at each campus currently, but we really focus a lot on early identification, being able to get kids in at first grade and diagnose them with dyslexia, or even through our kindergarten program, we're able to at least identify them as being at risk for dyslexia. So they're able to just come in very quickly and begin that evidence-based instruction. For our lower school, which is our K through 5 program, they all receive 90 minutes of academic language therapy each day. So that's in a really small group of 6 students to 1 teacher. And all of our teachers receive a certification, a 2-year certification to become a certified academic language therapist. So that just means that they're really the experts in that area of dyslexia and how to provide reading instruction to students with dyslexia. So those are our really big things, just that early identification, that evidence-based instruction, small group, and that support of a trained teacher.
That's so great. The training for teachers is essential. Um, with your certified academic language therapists, the teachers that are specially trained, do they use a boxed program like Wilson, Linda Mood Bell, or Barton?
So something that we really focus on is making sure that we're being very diagnostic and prescriptive in what we're doing with each group. So we don't prescribe to a specific system or curriculum. We use a lot of materials. We pull materials from different curriculums just to make sure that we're able to really adjust and determine what is the most useful for each student or each group. So we use a lot of NIHOUSE materials. That's really our basis, but we do bring in a variety of different pieces, just depending on what a student needs.
And what about multimodality? How is that instruction? And for listeners that don't know, that's using senses, like especially tactile or touch, in order to learn. How do you do that?
So it's our curriculum, our reading curriculum is very structured. So students do have those opportunities throughout that 90-minute block to be able to really interact with sounds. They learn each sound as a separate concept. So when they're learning about that specific sound, they are writing it, they're learning the handwriting of it, they are saying the sound and identifying it in different words. They're reading words that have the sound in it. So they're really able to interact in a variety of different ways. So they're hearing the sound, they're writing it, they're skywriting it, they're touching it. So they're able to really interact with each sound in a very specific way, which has been very useful.
Very good, because what I think I know is that with dyslexia, there's a problem in the brain with phonological processing. So the sound processing. And so is that why you spend so much time learning sounds and clusters of sounds?
Yes. So with dyslexia, it is something that is neurological in origin. So we know that kids with dyslexia have that difficulty in phonological processing. So they do struggle with being able to match that written letter to its sound. So that's really that core deficit. So they're really intelligent kids, very bright, average to above average intelligence. They just have this unexpected difficulty in that reading piece.
Tell me, Andromeda, why is it so important for parents and schools to identify early?
That is a great question. So just thinking about dyslexia in general, dyslexics, 1 in 5 people have dyslexia. So we know that dyslexia affects 20% of the population. There's kids with dyslexia sitting in every classroom. An issue just nationwide is just that identification of dyslexia, because even though we know that it's 20% of the population, for example, here in Louisiana, schools have recently had to report their incidence of dyslexia, and it came out to be less than 1%. So we definitely know that it's under-identified. So there are students in each classroom who aren't receiving the services that they need. And just thinking about early identification, we want to get kids into that evidence-based instruction as early as possible. Just thinking about progress over time, a lot of kids aren't identified with dyslexia until 3rd or 4th or 5th grade. And by that time, they've missed a lot of that central time that they needed to be able to gain those foundational skills. So it's much more difficult to remediate a student once they're older than it would have been if we got them in 1st or 2nd grade.
Okay. Yeah. So early identification. And you bring up, I noticed that you partner with the Yale Center for Creativity and Dyslexia. And I'm a huge fan of Dr. Shaywitz. But I think that's a wonderful resource for parents to go on. I love the resources listed on their website. How does Yale University, the center, work with Louisiana Key?
So we do work very closely with Dr. Sally and Bennett Shaywitz. They really have been a key resource to us just in how we structured our school day, just making sure that we're up to date on that science of dyslexia, because of course, science, we're always learning new things. So we're always able to reach out to them to get more information. They have published a ton of papers. We also have Overcoming Dyslexia, which is a book that was written by Dr. Sally Shaywitz. So we're able to really use that connection to make sure that we're connecting the science of dyslexia to the implementation of what we do in the classroom.
Great. So I imagine all of these parents in Louisiana want, that have kids who have language delays, want to get into your school. Is there a waiting list? And how do you sift through who's admitted, who's not? And is the waiting list years long?
So we have 3 different campuses. We started off in Baton Rouge. That school has been around for about 11 years, but we currently also have a campus in Covington, which is near New Orleans, and also a school that just opened in Shreveport. So because of the type of charter school we are, we can accept students from anywhere in the state. So we do have families who may drive like an hour or more just to get to one of our campuses. So we definitely want to continue to just expand across the state, and hopefully at some point even outside of the state, so that we can make sure that this opportunity is available to more students. So it's really important to us to serve the students that we have, but we're also really passionate about expanding this model, even if it's not with us, but talking with other districts, talking with the Department of Education and things like that, to see what are ways that we can pull certain things from our model so that they can be implemented in other schools, so that we can make sure that other students who can attend our school still are able to receive services.
I love it, because I'm here in Ohio and we need it here in Ohio with public schools all over. There was an Ed Week article about a new type of schools specializing in the treatment of students with dyslexia. And it is starting, and I'll put a link on the podcast to this article. The need exists because this author states there's inefficient teacher training and costly alternatives. How did you all get around that?
So we are a type 2 charter school. So we're authorized by the state as opposed to being authorized by a specific school board. So just with the type of charter that we are, we're able to accept public funds, which of course help us to be able to provide the instruction that we provide to students. Because thinking about those very small class sizes, of course, you have to hire more teachers. So we really are a no-frills school. Like, we really focus on spending all the funds that we have on the things that are going to benefit our students, making sure that we have trained teachers. We pay for that training for each one of our teachers. So that's something that we're also very proud of, being able to provide that professional development and that pathway for all of our teachers as well.
And what about the people who might say it's very costly, everything that you're providing them, from different programs, and you're using Newhouse, or is it Newhouse materials? Nyehouse materials. That's pretty costly. To what would you say to people in other states about that?
So I think part of it is our model is what it is because we are able to be a school specifically for kids with dyslexia. So I feel like in transferring from our school to like a public school or a different school, there are parts of our model that won't necessarily fit in with what they're able to do. But I think it's really important just to continue to spread that word about dyslexia, and that schools are able to understand the science, understand what these students need, so that they can provide what they need to the best of the ability of that school or that district. So with our school being just specialized for students with dyslexia, we really focus on those kids who have moderate to severe dyslexia.
Okay.
So if there's a student who may have a more mild form of dyslexia, maybe they can be serviced in a public school, but they're still going to need supports. They're still going to need teachers who understand dyslexia and are able to provide them with the accommodations that they need. So we're really big on everything that we do isn't something that every school is able to do, because they're working with kids who have all types of diagnoses, kids who have all these different needs, but just really understanding the science of dyslexia and being able to provide their dyslexic students with the pieces that they are able to provide.
Love it. Love it. What about your trend data? How successful are the students who move through your schools at different levels?
So we actually, I think this year was our first graduating class, our first kids who we had through 8th grade who are graduating from high school. And we've received a lot of great feedback from those families. We have kids who have gone to a variety of different high schools who have done very well educationally and academically, but also a big thing is just their self-confidence and just being able to build their skills to advocate for themselves, because a lot of the work as they become older is really focused on making sure that they have the accommodations and the technology that they need to be successful, because they have the intelligence to access the material. They may just need some extra support. So I think that's another big part of what our school focuses on, is just giving our kids a community, making sure that they also understand what dyslexia is, that it doesn't mean that they're dumb, that they can do just as well as other students. And we really focus on building their self-confidence, which is something that follows them as they transition out of our school and into the real world.
Absolutely. And I point out to the students with dyslexia with whom I work that some of the brightest people in the whole world, Steve Jobs, we wouldn't have this phone, have been dyslexic. As far as assistive technology, what kinds of assistive technology do students employ in your school campuses?
So something that we have really had a huge focus on this school year is Microsoft. So Microsoft has a reading progress tool where teachers can upload different passages and students have headphones and they're able to read the passages, and the tool actually tracks their accuracy, how many words they're reading correct. So just thinking about dyslexic students, we know the biggest thing that we can do for them is give them opportunities to practice reading aloud. So that's been really transformative, just to allow them to have, even at home, that opportunity to read aloud, and then the teacher can see how they did and provide that feedback. So that's something that we've just started to use this year. We also use things like speech to text. So for our students who really have a difficult time composing written material, being able to speak into their computer and get that written for them has really taken away a barrier for a lot of our students, especially some of our students who are more severe. We also have, of course, like read aloud, making sure that our students have breaks, small group instruction, just all of those different things. And the biggest thing, even though it's not a technology piece, but accommodation wise, is just giving them that extended time, because students with dyslexia use a more inefficient system when they're reading. So even if they can learn how to decode, learn how to read more fluently, they're always going to be slower readers than somebody who isn't dyslexic. So the tech tools are very important, but then simply just like those things, like giving them a smaller group, allowing them extra time to complete assignments, maybe reading certain things aloud to them if they need it. Even those things are wildly important as well.
Beautiful. What about spelling? I know that some teachers hold dyslexic students back. They're able to read the text, but they're not able to encode or spell all of the words that they're learning. And this is a conundrum, I think, for educators. What's your opinion?
So my very strong opinion is we have spell check. So let's just move on. That's my personal opinion. Dyslexic kids are never going to be super strong spellers. I'm not dyslexic. And if you look at spelling, like there's all these different rules, there's so many different ways things could be spelled. There is just no way to just figure all of that out, especially for a dyslexic student. So we are really big proponents of helping them to understand how to kind of sound it out so that it can get close enough to where spell check can recognize it, being able to use those tools and when they're composing written assignments, we don't count off for spelling errors, which I think is very important. That shouldn't, the focus should really be on the content of their writing and not as much of that spelling piece.
I love it. I love it. What about kids? This is what I encounter in my practice. Kids who are ashamed in public schools to use assistive technology accommodations. Do you ever have that at Louisiana Key?
So I feel like it's a little easier at our school just because all of our students, like when we introduce a assistive technology tool, it's something that most of the kids in the classroom are using. So that makes it a little bit easier. But I did a presentation at a private high school recently, and that was a question that came up because in that type of setting, a student would feel kind of set aside as different, especially as they get older, which is difficult. So I think it's really just up to that teacher to build that relationship with the student to help them overcome that barrier. Or if it's something that they don't feel comfortable using in the classroom, at least it's showing it to them, making sure that they understand how to use it, even if it's just something they can use at home.
Beautiful.
So if they don't want to feel different and use like speech to text in the classroom, maybe if you give them a 5-paragraph essay at home, you can show them how to use that and they'll feel more comfortable using it maybe for a homework purpose. So I think just always building that connection with the student, making sure that they understand what dyslexia is. And I think also something that's really cool is that technology is really changing to where even people who aren't dyslexic or people who don't have disabilities are using these types of things. So like even on my iPhone, if I don't want to like write out a text message, I just click and I just speak it out loud and it types it up for me. So I think that really takes away the stigma a bit because this isn't just something that dyslexic kids are using. This is something that everybody's using.
Absolutely. And Grammarly is used by millions of people worldwide, and it's so helpful, especially if you write a lot. How do you teach? Only a couple more questions. How do you teach science and social studies? If it's a school for dyslexia, people might think all you focus on is reading, but math, science, social studies, how is that integrated?
So we really focus on 3 academic priorities at our school, which are oral reading fluency, vocabulary, and oral and written language. So that isn't only done in reading, that's done across all content areas. So one thing that we always say is that a child with dyslexia, they aren't just dyslexic when they're doing reading or when they're in composition class. They're also dyslexic when they're doing math, when they're doing science. So we know that for kids with dyslexia, they really perform well learning things in context. They're not going to be your kids who can memorize dates or memorize math facts. That's not going to be the most useful way for them to learn material. So in all of our classes, our math, our science, our social studies, we really focus on making sure that they're immersed in the concept. So if there's a certain concept that they're learning about, they're doing projects, they're watching videos, they're going on field trips related to it, they're writing about it. So just really making sure that they're immersed in that content in each of their classes has been super important. And still in those other classes, we're working on reading fluency. They're reading stories about certain explorers. They're reading about motion. They're learning new vocabulary. So all of that work isn't isolated just to reading class. It's something that we really focus on in each and every content area.
Right. So it's very integrated.
Yes.
Where do your parents get decodable books? Like what are some of the good resources for content area decodable reading books?
So when we work with our families, we don't focus as much on the decodable piece because we really focus a lot on grade level material for our students, even if they aren't able to access it independently. So we really talk to our parents about finding something that their child is interested in learning about. And then even if it's something that is more difficult for them, that they're not able to read independently, maybe it's something where the parent can read a page and then the student can read a page, or maybe the parent can read and the student can echo. So we really just talk with our parents about providing different support, but we still want our kids to be able to access books that match their intelligence level and match and allow them to get access to the vocabulary that is appropriate for their age.
Love it. Right. And that's what we need to do to close the gap. What was my last question? I'm so spellbound. What would you say to governors across the US, United States Department of Education leaders? Why is this important that this model for Louisiana Key Academy is replicated across our country?
That's a great question. So I would say it just really points to that prevalence. So dyslexia is something that 20% of the population has. So it really has to be a focus. And I know that just in different departments of education just across the country, there's like this huge push, and there's always been a huge push for how do we address the issue of literacy? What do we do? We've been throwing millions of dollars at it. We've done tons of different things, but the way that we really address that deficit or that issue in literacy is the dyslexia piece, because we have students who struggle with reading for a variety of reasons, but of those students, a large amount of them are dyslexic. So if we can really focus on identifying dyslexia as early as possible, providing those students with the supports that they need, that's really how we make a dent in literacy. That's how we make that improvement, by addressing dyslexia. So I think that just finding that focus on that piece would have such a great output, more than anything else that we're doing.
And I agree. The students need the supports, and what I'm seeing, teachers must be trained. So I would say to the governors and the president that we need to have certified academic language practitioners. I'm Wilson certified, so I've gone through the whole Wilson thing, and it's very, very helpful. You have to have that specific training. I have a master's degree in reading, and I came across a boy in 2010 that I couldn't teach to read because he was truly dyslexic. And that's when I became Wilson certified. So the teachers must be trained, and we have to do it on large scale.
Exactly. That's so important. I would say that, yeah, teacher training and identification, I would say that those are two of the biggest things.
And it's promising now that we have states that have laws in order to identify. Where I think we fall down a little bit is that we don't have implementation plans. After they're identified, then what happens? So that's probably work that needs to be focused on. Any final thoughts, Andromeda?
I just, like I said, I just think it's very important. The things that I would want to leave people with is just really focusing on that science of dyslexia, recognizing that those students with the dyslexia are very smart. They're bright students. They have a lot of things that they can offer the world. They just need that extra support in reading. So really just that message about identifying these students, making sure that they receive the supports they need, and just kind of getting the word out about dyslexia, because it's so important and it's so prevalent.
Absolutely. And about what do you say about the percentage of people that really can learn to read? 85%, 90%, with the correct instruction. Can they learn to read?
Most dyslexic students can. And I think that points to that early identification. So it really depends on those things. How early are they receiving instruction? How severe is their dyslexia? Because we will have some students who never learn how to decode, but that doesn't mean that they can't become readers. So for example, if we have a student who may have gotten to middle school or high school and they're still a very poor reader, that's when we know that with accommodations, with technology, with audiobooks, they can still become very successful people. They can still have great careers. So I think that we just have to really focus on knowing that each student with dyslexia is going to be different. But if we're able to get them early and provide them with what they need, we can really set them up to be as close to a fluent reader as is possible for that individual student, which may look different.
You have shared so many important ideas and really vision, and you're giving us a vision for our country to help all of these kids with reading. And it also will transfer to adults. So we're hoping that people pay attention, because it is not that hard. It is a lot of hard work, but we know what works. And you, at all the people at Louisiana Key Academy, are making the dream happen for people in your state. So I applaud you. And I'm so delighted, Andromeda, that you joined Reading Swizzle today to share your insight.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.